Are ghosts real? Several recent encounters suggest there might be more things in heaven and earth than we can dream of.
So are werewolves just a Hollywood creation, or do half-man, half-wolf creatures really exist? Now, tonight, we kick off our Conspiracy Theory Month series, which was
The legend of the vampire actually goes back for centuries, and it exists in some form or another in almost every culture. In fact, some people believe the first vampire story was in the Bible.
Well, for decades, only crackpots and crazy people believed in UFOs. That's what I thought anyway. And then in recent years, it turns out that governments have been taking them seriously all along.
Try and clear up an ancient mystery with the help of a prominent veterinarian who says she can prove that Bigfoot exists and that he's related to all of us.
New reports, 5 pilots coming forward over the weekend saying they've had multiple mid-air encounters with high-flying, fast-moving objects.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for tuning in to Season 4, Episode 11 of the hit underground paranormal and supernatural radio show known as Celestial Oddities PONG, PairOfNormal Guys podcast. As always, I'm your host, Frater Crow.
And I'm your co-host, Daniel James.
And we would like to thank you for tuning in tonight. Make sure you click the like, share, follow, and subscribe buttons on whatever platform you're tuning in from, whether that's Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube, or if we're on anything else out there, because sometimes it's hard to tell. You share us around, click those buttons. We really appreciate it. Moves us up the podcast community rankings, allows more people to discover the show, keeps you in the loop with new episodes as they air, and gives you unfiltered access to our past archives of not only this show, Celestial Oddities PONG, but our other shows, Knights of the Nephilim and Uncovering the Underground as well. We bring you these shows through Celestial Oddities Radio, so make sure you give that Facebook page a like, as well as the Celestial Oddities Facebook group page, which is a great community to talk to one another, share your experiences, and be in a safe environment to talk paranormal and supernatural phenomena. We do want to thank you for obviously jumping in this evening. We have a great episode planned. Dan, it's always our favorite to do the Oddworld episodes, folks, where we take on phone calls from folks just like you. Hear what you have to say about your extraordinary stories of the unexplained and supernatural. So we'll be jumping into that in just a couple moments. If you've missed our past episodes this season, please jump back and check them out. And we're back, brother.
Hey, let's do it, man. I expect the chat to be popping off tonight.
Absolutely. And if you're listening out there and you have experiences yourself, you want to leave us comments, we will read them off on the air, whether it's questions you have, input that you're giving, or experiences you have. We will certainly show them and read them off. If you're someone who would like to jump on the show this evening, let us know, and that's possible as well. After we finish with our first caller, we can always try to send it to you, and if you're able to get linked up quick enough, we can bring you on the show as well. So share that around, get some other people jumping into the chat and into the stream here, and let's go ahead and jump into it. Tonight we have a caller. She goes by Bex, and we are going to bring her on, hear her extraordinary stories of what she's experienced, and then give a little input of what Daniel and I might think of the experience and what could have happened. So without further ado, let's go ahead and bring her on. Hello.
Hi.
Well, thank you very much for coming on the show this evening.
Well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you what, we'll jump right into it. If you don't mind, feel free to introduce yourself and then go ahead and begin with your first story.
Hi, I'm Bex. I'm a psychic animal communicator.
Awesome.
And I have 2 very interesting stories.
Awesome.
So the first one, I used to work security at a hospital. And one night I was doing rounds by myself, and there is this section of the hospital where we would take the people that had passed and were going on to their funeral home. As I was doing my security check, right behind me was a deep, huh. I whipped around so fast, nothing was there. And it never happened again in that section, but I ran out of that tunnel so fast.
It's very interesting. It's actually very interesting that you say this, because I'm involved in several networking communities and things. Last night, it was a networking group I belong to. They had a event at what's called the Mansions on Fifth, and very old mansion, very well-to-do. It's a hotel now you can go stay at, and I've been there several times in the past. And I was there, and the bathroom's downstairs, and it's almost like a maze. You go downstairs, you walk across a platform, go up a couple stairs, then down a couple stairs. It's like you're all over the place. Well, when I was in the restroom, when I first walked in, there was another gentleman in there washing his hands, and he left. I didn't think anybody else was in the restroom. And as I was at the sink finishing washing my hands, I heard a man behind me let out a And like I stopped for a second. I'm like, I swore I was in here alone. There was only one stall behind me and the door was open. So I'm like, okay. I turned around, looked in, there was no one in there. And I threw my my paper towels away, went over to the door, and was as I was pulling the door open, once again behind me in the bathroom, I heard a and it was a very clear, audible man's sigh. In a very vacant, empty bathroom. So very interesting, and just reminded me as you told your story. Now, when you worked there, did you experiencing anything else in that hospital other than that specific sigh?
I heard stories. I've worked in a few different medical facilities, so I've definitely seen apparitions. I've seen my residents that have just passed maybe a week ago walking down the hallway.
Okay. Interesting.
Yes.
So you weren't new to having experiences. It's just one that kind of stood out to you just because of just the sound of it and the kind of surprise of it.
Yes. So my next story, it's a build kind of story.
Okay.
So I was 16 years old, and this is very embarrassing. I was sitting in the bathroom, and out of nowhere there was this deep growl, and it did not sound very pleasant, and my shower curtains started to move. I definitely ran out of there, and then about a week or so later, we watched the movie Drag Me to Hell.
Okay.
And went to bed, no issues. Around 3 a.m., my dresser flew across my room.
Oh, wow.
I was 16 years old. I ran from my bedroom straight into my parents' room and stayed there, slept right in between them.
Now, do you think, and Daniel and I have talked about this, and I've talked about this myself on other, lives and speeches and things, that do you think that was something exterior to yourself, or do you think at the time the fear that you had from the movie could have possibly created a manifestation from you? I know it's kind of a strange concept, but
That's a very interesting perspective. I've never thought about it like that. I've always, you're raised that you're kind of predator-prey situation.
okay.
Like something's always trying to get you. So that's interesting that it could have really just come from me.
A lot of manifestation does. It's something I've pushed heavily. I know myself that I think, and here's where it gets very, very tricky to explain to anybody. It comes from you, but it might not necessarily be you. And people say,
Okay.
well, what does that mean? Well, internally, if you go inwards, everything's there. Outside of you is only what you can see and touch and hear, what your senses can pick up stimuli from. That's what's outside of you. But you go internal, and the entire universe is inside there. So you have to dissolve the body. And once you do that, all spirits, all gods, all ghosts, all entities, and all experiences really are inside of there in some sort of way. So a lot of times I feel like we manifest things from us, through us, as a vessel outwards to cause phenomena to happen. So it's coming from you, but in some cases it might truly be you using faculties you don't realize you have, or it could be something using you in a way, coming out of you to make that happen, using you as a tool, so to speak. So very different perspective, but things I've certainly experienced and have been building on through my research over time. Dan, what are your thoughts?
Right. So I subscribe to both ideas. I validate whichever your perspective is. There is a tangible sort of, in a sense, reason, right? We can determine that from whatever your belief structure is. So I love to investigate these things a little bit in terms of like, we would start with like a series of questions. So say, for example, the experience when you were younger. Well, there is a theory, which I find a lot of validation to, that when we watch horror films that generally depict an entity, a demon, demonic entity, or some sort of, creature in that sense, that you can look at it like those types of films almost work as a portal into allowing those types of energies into our home, into our space, into our mind, into our belief structures, into our fear, which our fear is a very powerful motivator in terms of manifestation. So let's say, for example, if we're looking at it externally, I could justify the fact that perhaps watching those types of films, they do open the door for us to be making types of contact to entities that, generally speaking, are the things that we're seeing depicted in movies. Television entertainment is a portal in that way that helps sort of influence our belief structures, that we then use our manifestation abilities as deliberate creators, whether it's conscious or subconscious. We have the power to create things. And so when we watch things, we can be inadvertently, unintentionally influenced by them. And you can then create those experiences in your own reality from maybe the fear or subconscious beliefs. Or B, we're looking at it externally in a more practical way, that it can work as a portal in a sense that maybe entities that exist in that realm, whether it's a work of fiction or based on a true story, I don't think that matters, because the power of our perception and the power of belief, especially in the subconscious, it doesn't really know the difference. So then we're actually inviting those things into our home. It's a whole type of like magic that I've studied. It's a whole mechanism where you can actually imbue and program movies and TV shows and other forms of art with certain intentional energy that has an effect. So oftentimes, whether we know this or not, we could watch a horror film and then actually be consenting to having an experience like that for ourselves. So that's one way to look at it that a lot of people have sort of haven't considered. But I like to say that to always protect people, that when they are watching horror films, especially if they're about a specific entity, something supernatural, to protect ourselves, protect our consciousness, protect our energy, because the programming can actually have a real deliberate effect on our personal lives. And then, so that's just an interesting thing to ponder on. And then when you heard the vocalization, the other story that was more recent, let me ask you a question. Do you feel like that could have been the spirit, the consciousness of the person who passed? Or do you feel like maybe it was the presence of something else?
I mean, it could really go either way. I mean, I, at that point, had not touched any bodies, so...
Sure.
But, yeah, I don't see why not on either side.
Did you get the feeling, though, that it was of like more of a ghostly apparition or a human spirit, or did you get the feeling that it was something other?
Human, I wasn't afraid for my life. It was more of like jump scare.
Sure.
Gotcha. Okay.
Like,
So most
hey,
most
I'm
likely,
here.
most likely a spirit of some sort, not an entity. There is a separation I try to tell people is, spirits are going to be spirits of the human dead or, animal dead and things of that nature. Whereas entities are going to be, more ancient beings who do bring a very different vibration, very different energy and experience to them. One of the things I just mentioned, animal dead, I know that you said something kind of surprising at the beginning. You said that you have mediumistic skills and that you work with animals heavily in that. Can you tell us a little bit maybe about your practice and what it is you do?
Okay, so it's not something that I use to profit. It's more of to better understand the world around me.
Okay.
I have two dogs and 5 cats, and I learned so much just about life through them.
Okay.
Yes. Wildlife, I've asked a fish what it's like to swim one time. It's crazy. I asked a bird what it was like to fly, and it's G-forces. Just cruising.
Well, the thing is it's not as crazy as you might believe. I mean, and we've talked about this, if you put yourself out there and you try to connect to things, a lot of times you're going to connect to things. And we all have our own ways of doing it. I mean, say you take the 3 of us right now. I mean, I am very entwined in the spirit world. I work with spirits heavily. Daniel works with extraterrestrial intelligences heavily. You work with animals. I mean, we all have our own specialty. I wouldn't do very well working with extraterrestrial intelligence. It's not something I have a background in, not something I know where to begin with it, other than Daniel and I's conversation. Same thing with animals. I'm very much am an animal lover, but I have no idea where I would start to really pick up on the deeper senses other than, surface level. So it's just one of those things. If you have that knack and that skill at it, you work to kind of develop that further, and you can really get to depths that most people don't understand. So very, very cool.
You would really be surprised with how human animals are and how they perceive everything.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, they're very in tune. They're at a different level than us. That's the thing is, people talk about, human beings being the only, I want to make a differential here, the only ones with souls. Now, where that gets tricky is you get to define what souls and what spirits are. And it's used interchangeably, especially with religion. Souls would be the higher faculty of intelligence that humans have, of right and wrong and things of that nature, not spirit. Spirit would be the life essence that imbues all of us to be here and be alive and be existent in this 3D matrix. A soul would be your egoic self, your higher mind, or sub-middle mind, I guess you could say. So, we look at animals, they don't have a soul. They're not like a human being where they understand the same as we do when it comes to judging things. But with that also could be a freedom for animals, because they're not limited to the structures that we kind of live by. We're programmed from a very early age, all the things that we know, whereas an animal understands instincts. It understands certain elements that we teach it, but it's very free and doesn't have those prisoning structures that we have. So like you said, if you start to pay attention to that and really start to tune into that, they're in a whole different vibration than we are.
Yes. They are, I often say they're pure love, or the closest you can get to love, like in an energy form.
Unless they're kangaroos and they're just dicks. That's my note for
I don't know.
Kangaroos are dicks, folks. That's what I'm going to say. Everybody out there listening, kangaroos are dicks. I only
Who
say
hurt
this.
you, Garrett? Who hurt you?
The kangaroos hurt me, Dan. When I was a young kid.
That's how I feel.
When I was a young kid, I went to the part of the zoo that had like a petting zoo section. And for some reason back then, there wasn't near as many rules in the early 90s as there was, now. And they let you go into the kangaroo pen, but there wasn't a zookeeper in there. So they shut this wall, and it was like a walled in, like 10-foot high section, and no one could even see you. So once they shut the kids inside to pet the kangaroos, like they couldn't even see if something went wrong. Well, I went in there as a kid, and I was the only one in this kangaroo pen. And I remember like, oh, look at all these cool kangaroos. And I tried to pet them. Them little bastards, like, box kicked me. They jump up and kick. They grabbed a hold of my shirt, and like 8 of them were jumping up and down and beating the shit out of me. And I'm like yelling, and no one came in. It took like 5 minutes before the zookeeper came in. And then I didn't have an encounter again with kangaroos for like 10 years. Next one I came into contact with grabbed a hold of my shirt and tried to kick me again. I'm like, all right, fuck these things. So that's my note tonight from Frater Crow, is kangaroos are pricks.
Some shadow work there, a lesson.
I got some shadow work to deal with on the kangaroo front. Let's see, Laura, thank you for tuning in, Laura. We have You Must of FAFO with the wrong Roo. Yeah, I did.
Found out.
Yeah, I did. Apparently 8 of them.
Real quick, since we have you, on the concept of animal communication, right? Is that what you said that you do?
Yes, animal psychic communication.
Okay, solid. So I'll share a little of my exercises and my experiences with you as well. So I don't call myself a channeler, but I can channel. And once I taught myself how to do that, which is a part of intuitive based, but it's less of like being like an intuitive or a medium, and rather just using a mechanism of the concept of shifting your brainwave frequencies. Anyways, when I taught myself how to channel, I did become more consciously intuitive to nature and to animals, and I was able to start feeling all of my animals' emotions. And when you can feel their emotions, you can almost tell what they're thinking, because their emotions, you can assume its state of being from that point. And then I would start to hear thoughts, like I would hear sort of phrases, or I would hear what their mood is and things like that. And so I got really fascinated in the concept of deliberately making a link to my cats and trying to have like a open communication the way that humans would. So I first started by teaching them human English. So all of my cats can generally understand about 20 English words. And I do that through a practical method of just training, like in a practical way without anything spiritual. And I would use sort of exercises where whatever words or phrases that I wanted them to understand, I would associate with an action. And I would do that in repetition until little by little, I know that these cats would be anchoring in the tone of my voice, the inflections, the words. They would have an understanding of what that meant associated with the action, so much so that I would not need to do the action anymore. And then I could just say the words. And now, like say for example, I have a 3-year-old kitten, Inanna, and I know that I can have full conversations with her. She's closer to like 25 words, whereas my boy cat's maybe on the lower end of 20. And you get that confirmation from them both intuitively and by their response when you speak to them.
Mm-hmm.
So then taking that further outside of just the practical realm of using language and action and it for them to learn English. So a more intuitive way that I learned how to communicate to my cats was using mental imagery. So what I would do is go into just a very calm state, make sure that my mood is good, my vibration is high, I'm in a place of love, I'm not angry, and then I would send mental images where I would close my eyes and then I would imagine the cats doing the thing or me having the interaction with them that I would see play out in my imagination. And I would send that to the cats like a mental image, like Wi-Fi, like sending an email or a text message. And I would do that in repetition over and over and over. And then I would watch the cats and see how they respond to that, see how they are interacting with my thoughts. And then I realized that there is a degree of them being able to like actually see what I'm sending them, like a telepathy. And so, well, a lot of people don't know that our animals, not just our cats, but other animals as well, even our dogs, specifically wildlife too, are deeply intuitive, that they can actually pick up on the current of thought forms. So if you have an intention and a vibrational frequency to match that, then you seal it with a mental image. That is a way of communicating with animals, and whether or not they can respond to you is another story. But I do believe that with a little bit of training, that's another viable method of communication to animals. Do you do something like that, or what's your process?
So they don't say words to me. It is a lot of mental flashes.
Sure.
I'll get sensations. So I didn't know you were supposed to soften your dog's kibble.
Mm-hmm.
After connecting to my dog, I had started to feel the back of my jaw hurt.
Okay.
And put 2 and 2 together, made her soft food, connected the next day, and didn't feel the pain.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So it's small, subtle things, but you have an inclination that once it happens, you know what it's regarding. So what could seem like something that someone might just say, oh, my jaw hurts today, you can feel that there's a link and it's coming from your pet, and you're saying, wait a second, they're telling me something. It's about that, as Dan said, that intuitiveness of picking up those subtle hints, which is an important thing. A lot of people in the spirit world, I speak only in my world, people experience spirits all the time.
Right.
They just don't know they're experiencing spirits all the time. And it's because they ignore the subtle, things that are happening because, that's just coincidence, or I'm just imagining things. But it's like, if you paid attention to those, it's like a breadcrumb that'll lead you back to the bakery. You just got to follow it. And that's where the real magic happens. But most people short themselves. Now I have a comment here, and let me throw it up. It says, is it only animals that you can communicate with? So I guess what this listener is asking is, do you communicate with anything else like ghosts or like aliens or anything like Dan does? Is it mainly that is your specialty, is the animals?
Animals mostly, yes. Events will happen or I'll hear something and I ignore it because I don't have the time for that right now.
Mm-hmm.
No, I understand it. You get involved. Like I said, you open up Pandora's box, it doesn't close no more, as they say. So very understandable. We got another listener here saying hi. We have another one saying hi, Daniel. Yes. I don't know what the yes was to, but we're going to say yes. And then my buddy Bob says, listening on the way home with my little ones. Interesting topic tonight. Absolutely, brother. Stick around. We got some other great stuff to talk about. But Bex, I do want to thank you, obviously, for coming on the show, sharing a little bit about what you do and what you've experienced. And Daniel and I will continue to recap on that afterwards. And anything else you want to say before you jump off?
No, is there anything, you guys have any questions?
No, I think at the moment we're good, but we do want to thank you, obviously, for coming on. There's something I want to throw out at Daniel about what he said earlier. So if you want to stick around and listen, you certainly can. And we want to thank you once again for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. You have a wonderful night.
Bye,
Take care.
You too.
So, Daniel, this makes me think of something. I didn't get to read the article.
Okay.
But I seen the header and I seen I clicked on and read the first paragraph and then I got bored and left. It's hard to sometimes keep my attention, but you had mentioned the horror movies and how it opens up, doorways for thought forms and other things to come through. I seen something that said that there is a theory that Freddy Krueger, and I don't buy it, but it's an interesting concept, that Freddy Krueger actually was the thought form that sparked the phenomena of the Shadow Hat Man. That after the movies of Nightmare on Elm Street came out, it got embedded into the collective unconscious of this boogeyman monster figure who wore this hat. It frightened the hell out of people. People were scared of it, especially back in the 80s. You know what I mean? When that was coming out, you're like, oh my God, I've never seen anything like this. Look at this guy. And it embedded in there, and then over generations, it just built and created this egregoric thought form that haunts people's dreams. And that's why in this article, I was trying to say that hat men are usually always seen during dreams, during sleep paralysis.
Sure, yeah. I've seen them.
That it became a thought form of Freddy Krueger based off of him. So I found it to be very interesting.
Oh, I like that. Let's dissect that and unpack it just a little bit. Big fan of this topic. Now, one of the extraterrestrial races that I work with, they have actually talked about the Hat Man as an entity, and they have confirmed that its existence, that it does exist in like an astral realm and astral frequency. And it is a little bit more of like the sort of like malevolent, in a sense, type 2 type of entity where it does sort of feed on fear. But they never said what its origin was. They just said that they've encountered it, that it does exist, similar to like the shadow people race, which are just another species. Now, here's my theory. I know that it's out there. Did humans create it as an egregore? Absolutely possible. The same way that the concept of the Slender Man that we've discussed, I think twice now on this season. Yep. So, and what's a really fun question is what came first, like the chicken or the egg, right? So let's say, for example, A, did people see Nightmare on Elm Street, perceive Freddy Krueger, and then manifest an egregore of the Hat Man that people see during sleep paralysis as a result of that collective mass consensus fear? Or did a force, an organization that knows how this type of magic works, that knows the power of subconscious manifestation, creational energy, did they implant the Friday the 13th, the Nightmare on Elm Street films and Freddy Krueger as a fictional entity for the Hat Man, who does exist as a real entity in of itself, so that we would bring him through, so that they used film as a portal that would allow him into our homes, the chicken or the egg?
Well, that's a very good concept, because like I was going to say, my qualm with it is that, and I can't prove this right now, I'd have to do more research. I just thought of it whenever she was mentioning the horror movie and you said, so I'd have to do some more research. But I think that there's older accounts of the Hat Man than the Nightmare on Elm Street. But I could be wrong, because I mean, I'd have to look up, what year Nightmare on Elm Street originally aired. But I think that in our notes, I think we have accounts longer than that or older than that, but it's something we would have to look into. Now, like you said, what could be plausible 1984. So yeah, I mean, that is a long time ago now. You could think that's 40 years ago. So has there been accounts of the Shadow Man, the Hat Man before 40 years ago? I don't know. I mean, most of the ones we have heard have been within the last 20, 30 years. So that is a very good concept. But as you mentioned, could it be that this astral being already existed? They wanted to bring it more present into our world rather than a very, very random off chance that it came here was sighted in Dream World. And they create a character off of him that's more realistic in a movie than just a shadow being. And they planted into all teenagers across the world watching these movies and adults. And here you go 40 years later, and they're still making, additions to it or remakes of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's forever embedded in the collective unconscious now. So it's very, very interesting. Now, John, or Gene, you put Shadownomicon by D.H. Thorne. I've never read it. I know that D.H. Thorne had put out a book to work with shadow beings. I've never read any D.H. Thorne, but that is an interesting concept that in a magical sense, in a ritual sense, folks, there's a gentleman named D.H. Thorne who put out a book on how to work and control shadow beings for magical work.
I see.
I have encountered them many times on investigations. I've encountered them many times in outings. They never seem like something you would easily control. So it's an interesting concept. I don't know about it though. They're very much independent and do their own thing. Spirits.
Yeah, they're a race. They're a race like we are.
Daniel, you look like you're thinking very hard.
I have a very concentrated face. I actually do. Like when I'm playing music or whenever I'm like in deep thought, my face makes all these intense expressions. So
that's okay. I mean, sometimes you'll see me like zoned out, staring at a distance, and I'm just pulling things out of the filing cabinet.
Sure.
And another question came in: do you think that it's a demon from the Ars Goetia or the Lemegeton? No, I don't. I don't think the Hat Man. I think it's its own thing, as Daniel said. It's a race of beings.
Yeah.
Because I've encountered other ones that don't have hats on.
Right.
But I think it is a complete race of astral beings that exist. And they're independent of what you would know as daemons or daimons, demons or elementals or ghosts. They're an interdimensional species of being that have passageway to our world and frequently come and go.
Definitely.
And a lot of times they happen to bring absolute terror and fear with them, and they bring sleep paralysis in some of them. But I talked to folks recently on a little podcast thing that I did called Last Call. If you go check that out, it talks about a demon possession case, or I named it Lions, Tigers, and Demons. Oh my. And what I talk about is it's not a demon that possessed this guy in the story that I talk about. It was a shadow being, and it was a mixture, I think, of a ghost of a human dead. Attached to it was a parasitic interdimensional entity. So it was no longer a human dead. It was no longer a parasite, or what I believe truly is a demonic entity, a parasite. It was a crossbreed of the two, carrying some personality traits and humanistic mannerisms, that it would have once had, but also at the same time being neither at the same time. So go back and check that out. It's on my page, Frater Crow, on Facebook. Lions, Tigers, and Demons. Oh my. Very good overview of what my team experienced back in 2018 in May, of an encounter with a possession with a Hat Man. Very nice event. What else we got here? Spooky. It was a little spooky. I don't know if you're talking about that specifically or something else we said, but that was interesting. I've seen people become possessed before. It's not really that out of normal whenever you work a lot of ritualistic magic, depending on the type of ritualistic magic you do. But when you're not doing magic and you're just in a location doing investigations, talking to the spirits, and all of a sudden someone's zapped and becomes possessed and starts talking in tongues and all kinds of weird shit like that, it is a little spooky. It does definitely stand out, surprises you a little bit, but you have to keep composure and work to get it back out. But I do believe, like I said, they are some type of other race, and I do believe that they're much, 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 much older than 1982. Maybe not that specific being, although I would think so as well. But shadow beings as a whole certainly are much older than Nightmare on Elm Street.
So I'll share a story from my friend who's one of our regulars. I don't know that he'll be joining the chat tonight, but I know that he told me that he had an encounter the other day that he found to just be interesting and noteworthy. So in case he doesn't make it to the show tonight, I'll account it for him. He's our friend Hunter that always jumps in the chat and likes to try to make me laugh. Or So he said that he was driving down the road the other day, and he saw a gentleman on the side of the road who had average, normal clothes on, normal long sleeve shirt, jeans, nothing special, out of the ordinary characteristically. But he took note of this person as he passed. And then just as he passed and he looked into his rear view, he was completely gone. So the person had vanished just in the time that it took him to pass the person, then look in the mirror. Then he looked over, did a double take, and there was just no one there.
He fell off the hillside.
Right. Yeah, I did too. You better look in the bed of your truck, buddy. So that's actually happened before. Like, I know that my mom has said that the same thing's happened to her before, where she's seen someone walking down the road, and then when she passes them, they're not in the mirror. They're not in the reflection, and then when they turn to look, that person's gone. I thought that was noteworthy to mention for him because the same thing did happen to my mom on 2 different occasions. And I wonder if that is a matter of, like, say, for example, someone's deep in thought and their mind just plays tricks on them, or if that's maybe a trickster entity or an energy that's just there that, you know, they happen to catch them while they're phasing in and out of our version of reality. There's a lot of explanations of what that could be as to why there is a person visible and then they're not there anymore.
I think that, you know, what it could be is spirits are still very much present. They're here, they're living. In a way, you know, they're not in a physical carnate body, but
right.
they carry on with existence. And what I think happens is they want to be seen, but they don't want to be noticed. So, for instance, if they can walk down a sidewalk or a road in an area where people are going to see it, but no one's really going to pay any attention to it, it's just a regular individual walking down the sidewalk. So they're able to be a part of our world again, reminisce, walk around, be seen, but no one's going to be like, oh my God, it's a ghost, depending upon how strongly they can come through. That brings up a very unique question we can jump into at some point about why do some spirits come through as an astral white mist and translucent?
Right.
And some spirits come through in color. If you have the ability, is it just more energy, or is it certain type of abilities that spirits have? Because if they can come through in color, then why wouldn't they walk down the sidewalk? Why wouldn't they be a part of our world? And it's going to be rare that someone looks in the rearview mirror and happens to notice that person's not there. We're so busy with our lives. So it's like they get to be a part of it, but they're also separate. But in the off chance someone looks up to see it, boom, they're gone. They turn around. It was just like a quick way that they could be here. So why they do it, it's hard to say. But I do know that they still very much want to be, you know, in contact with us, you know, and maybe it was something for your friend, Hunter. Maybe it was someone that had contact with him for some reason. Maybe it wasn't just a random. Maybe he might not have known who it was, you know, on the top of his mind, but it might have been someone he knew or is one of his ancestors, because that happens often. Now we have Sync ID come in at this moment, and you mentioned Hunter. I'm here at the graveyard waiting on my friend Hunter. Small world. There you go, Gary. You know, the synchronicities, you have to pay attention pay attention to them, brother. That was a tongue twister. So, you know, definitely pay attention to that and see what happens tonight, because that's an off chance. That's not a very common name. Laura put, we had a very interesting conversation this morning, didn't we, Frater? Yes, I would like to say, without getting into too much detail, because it was a personal situation. Laura and I have talked several times, and she's gifted in the sense of being able to see spirits. And she let me know that she oftentimes on these live streams and in other videos and things I've done, notice spirits behind me. She can visibly see. And I asked her, could you give me any information on it? And she proceeded to give me amazing information, information that no one else could possibly know, about a deity that I work with that I've never mentioned to anyone, that is very, very old and very powerful. It's not a common name that most of you would ever hear or even know. And then she proceeded to tell me about a family member who I never met, but died many years ago, that I always wanted to meet, and went on to tell me what age they died at, how they died, their name, and so forth. Something that I've never publicly talked about with anyone ever. And what was really interesting, guys, and I'll share this was a really mind-bending experience. After she told me all of this information about my family member, I was in the middle of putting my suit on. I was reading her message and we were kind of messaging back and forth. I was getting ready to go to a work event, and I'm standing at my closet that I keep all my suits in. And all of a sudden, within my closet, someone starts knocking. And I stood there and watched or heard the knocking audibly for about a minute and a half. And then just to tell myself, like, I knew it was a spirit, but I'm like, let's go check the front door. I checked the front door, looked around the outside of my house. It's pouring rain. No one's outside. You didn't hear any knocking outside. It wasn't a neighbor or anything like that. I had to check all my bases. I'm a very thorough investigator. I went back up and sat in the room, and I spoke to my family member and said, if that's you, could you please knock again? And within 2 seconds, the knocking started again. I knocked, they knocked, went back and forth. I took a video of it earlier. And then I stuck my hand on the wall of my bedroom. And as they were knocking, I could literally feel the raps of vibration going through the wall as they knocked. So it was amazing that she was able to tell me that, unbeknownst to me, someone who works pretty heavily in the spiritual field, that a deceased family member has been with me my whole life and been very close to me, watching over me, and was able to tell me all the details about him. And then he knocked in the room to secure it right next to me. And I'm like, oh, shit. Okay. So he is definitely here. And then she proceeded to give me some other amazing messages as well. So it was very amazing. So Laura, thank you for that experience. That was one of those moments, guys, where if that was the only moment you ever had in your life, it would be sufficient. I'm fortunate enough to get a lot of those in my lifetime, and I'm truly humbled. Daniel, you can always get in touch with Laura at some point if you'd like. She said that she noticed during our podcast that both of us actually have spirits standing around us, and she's noticed it multiple times. I was only speaking from my regard. So she could maybe sometime tell you a little bit more about who she sees around you and what they come across as, and the hints that they gave her, because it's all, guys, you have to understand, it's not always going to be an exact story.
Right.
They're going to say things, give you imagery. As I've talked about in a recent podcast as well, images and imagery symbolism is how spirits talk to you. So if they show you a picture of something, and in her mind as a medium, that picture stands for something and it means something. So she was throwing out the picture she was getting, and they were fucking dead on. It was quite amazing. So I was really happy to hear about that. So once again, Laura, thank you.
I don't know if you noticed or not. Also, while you were talking, my light turned off, which I find to be interesting because it never does that.
There you go.
So I'm gonna use a backup light that's right here. I'll be right back. But that was first time.
Okay. Oh, hey, I like it. Like I said, hey, my closet was knocking, so everything's on the table today. The cell phone is a portal. I mean, yeah, your cell phone. I mean, everything's portals. You can, different things can be conduits for spirits. Cell phones, TVs, radios. I mean, they're all frequency. What's a cell phone? It's a device that carries multiple frequencies. It's able to do multiple capabilities of energy exchange. Televisions, they're boxes that emit frequency. Radios, boxes that emit frequency. They're tuners. So all of these things can be used by spiritual beings to communicate. So definitely, we live in a world where there's devices all around us, spirits all around us. We just don't, take often enough time to pay attention to them. Laura said more towards Daniel. Yes, she did make the mention, Daniel, that we both have spirits around us. She noticed 3 around me, and she got into 2 of them today. That was, like I said, pretty profound.
Nice.
She noticed that there's more around you, and they're more frequently around you on these broadcasts. So pretty cool. Like I said, you definitely have to connect with her and go over that. And she says your camera's going in and out of focus as well, which was happening earlier. That could just be malfunction, or that could be something trying to get his attention.
It's I can tell you why. There's a technical reason. My setup has changed tonight than it usually is, and my microphone is higher, and the focus is grabbing on the back of my mic right here, because I had to move all this gear for a voiceover recording session I had a couple days ago, and I don't have it completely dialed in the way that I do for the podcasts. So because it's actually up so high in my mic stand, the focus is grabbing the focus right here. So
that makes sense.
It needs to be adjusted.
That's all right. It's not really that noticeable, at least not on my end. I got a question that says, do you think that you could do ghost hunts with baby monitors? Absolutely. I think baby monitors are actually a really good device to use. I have a picture that I've shared online before, and I can drop that in the group chat again on Facebook, that I caught a just phenomenal picture of 2 spirits, one very prevalent, and then the other one you can see on my son's baby monitor. I woke up in the middle of the night, and I kept hearing this, all this sound coming from his monitor. And I lay there for like a minute or two, and I'm like, what the hell is going on? Because I didn't hear him moving. I just heard all these noises, and I'm like, ugh. I stood up and I walked around the side of the bed. It was on my wife's side of the bed. And I'm half asleep, blurry eyed, looked into the monitor, and I noticed something lean in and then lean out of the focus of the monitor. And I watched it like 2 or 3 times, and I'm like, what in the hell is that? Because I can see he's sleeping. And then I watched it lean in and then lean out. And then I'm like, oh, wow. And like I said, I see spirits quite often, but not like a medium. Like I said, like Laura seeing the things that are around me, I can't see them, but I do see spirits a lot. So I don't know why we're tuned into different beings and how that works sometimes, but I have a picture of what looks like the hag woman, the traditional witch face,
right?
Long twisted nose and very what you would imagine to be scary looking. But I don't believe that this was a malicious entity. I believe it was a guardian for my son. And, could be even one of my guardians watching over him. And I watched it lean into the frame, and I took the picture, and you can see in this frame a half of an entire face. You see the ear, you see the eye, you see the nose, you see the mouth, and the hair. It's phenomenal. I've about a dozen pictures of spirits that are all very good. But this is one of the best ones. And it was strictly from a baby monitor. Now the picture was taken from my phone of the screen of the baby monitor.
Sure.
But to answer your question, I believe that, yes, baby monitors are a great tool. They have night vision on them. They pick up sound. They pick up video. So you could use them as someone uses a static cam on like the TV shows and stuff out there. You could certainly use a baby monitor for that. And if it has recording capabilities, even better.
So we'll both answer this one, but I'll let you go first.
We'll see what we got here. Well, first, let's go creepy. I sent you a picture that I caught. Oh, yes. Real quick before we jump into the question, Laura did send me a picture that if she gives me permission to, I will post up in the group as well. Phenomenal. It could appear as 3 different entities in the same picture, and this was taken in her home. I believe it is actually the transfiguration of a spirit coming fully material in this realm. So you see it as a shadow being off to the left. Then you see it as a shadow being with a little bit more defined features, very, very little, but more. And then the third is it actually manifesting in color of a man, a mustache. So you see the 3 levels of projection as it's merging into our frequency in our visual cortex. It takes on 3 different shapes. I don't believe it's 3 different spirits. It could be, but I believe it's the 3 phases of the spirit manifesting. She says, of course you can. So I will share that in the group as well. It's a very good capture. So make sure you share that. And the question Dan was asking about or mentioning, do you think we live in a simulation? That's a very hard question to answer, Gene. I mean, yes, but what is your definition of simulation? You have to understand that we're eternal spirits and beings that have existed forever. We will exist forever. We've taken on different names and avatars and psyches and personalities and egoic selves to experience this world in many different versions and many different ways as an experience. I've mentioned before, people focus so much to unlock the God within, which is important. But you have to understand we are eternal gods in the flesh. So you can't ignore the flesh completely because we already were eternal and we chose to become in the flesh because we wanted to experience sensation and physicality and sensorial perceptions. So yes, it's a manifestation of sorts. I put up a post a week or 2 ago that said, if you look at quantum physics and quantum mechanics, it talks about the fact that everything is energy. There's no such thing as matter.
Right.
Everything is energy. The desk I'm sitting at's energy. It's more empty space than it is solid. Mm-hmm. It's just that it puts off a certain frequency. So when my hand slaps down on it, the friction of the atoms in the desk from the friction of the atoms in my hand, like a magnet, repulse one another. So that's what creates the friction of the slap.
Right.
If I punch it, it breaks the bones in my hand because the density of the vibration of the desk particles are more densified than that of my hand. So it breaks it. You could say it's just you hitting matter, but matter doesn't exist.
Right.
So we understand that it is vibration and frequency punching vibration and frequency, and it destroys one of them. So we live in a very frequency and vibrational world. Now, where this gets interesting, and my whole point of this, and then I'll jump it over to Dan, is that it has already been proven through the double slit experiment that energy takes on a completely different pattern when being monitored than it does when it's not. They sent out pulses to the double slit, and whenever it wasn't being observed, it was in wave patterns all over the back wall. Not how you would think it'd be. You think it would hit as bullets. You're shooting these waves, it would go through the doors and just hit the things behind it, but it spread the whole way across it. Whenever they would put a camera on it or visually watch it, its markers would hit in balls on the wall, meaning that the vibrations itself literally change when they know they're being observed.
Because our consciousness
alters
our consciousness itself, our own unique like singularity point as a perspective, has an influence on what that matter is, what it does, what its materialization of form is. It's dictated by our perception of it.
Well, and that's why I put in this post that and this could never happen. It's impossible, but just contemplate on it. What if every living creature on this planet, there's multiple planets out there, multiple creatures, but let's just say ours. If every human being, every insect, every animal closed its eyes at the exact same time and kept them closed for 1 minute, would we fail to exist as beings? Because we only exist because there's always that tangible link. I close my eyes, the world disappears pretty much visually. If I took away my sense of hearing, my sense of sight, my sense of touch, my sense of taste and smell, then I'm gone.
Right.
I'm just a spirit now.
Right.
The only reason I'm human is because you give me sight, hearing, taste, touch, smell.
That's correct.
You dissolve all of that right away, and I fail to exist. Well, if everyone closed their eyes right now, put headphones on, noise canceling, somehow dulled their senses, and every living creature did it at the exact same time, reality wouldn't exist, because as I close my eyes, Dan's eyes are still open, or my neighbor's eyes are still open. There's always someone keeping the simulation alive.
Right.
But we all tune out of the simulation at the exact same time. Does the simulation fail to exist?
There's that phrase, I am, therefore you are, or you are, therefore I am. So here's my perspective on it, right? Let's first start with this statement. Reality does not exist, but your experience of it does. So what does that mean? Are we in a simulation specifically in the way that you said it, a computer one? I do not believe so. No, not in the way that Neo jacks into a computer program. But caveat to that, you can actually have an incarnation on Earth as a human using the same type of technology that you see in the Matrix, and that's called the immersion program. But that doesn't mean that Earth and human civilization is a computer hologram or a simulation of, say, for example, depicting something that is more real than this. Your perception of reality is the total version of reality. This is as real as anything that you can imagine needs to be, because your focus and attention as a creator being is right here and it's right now. I'm looking at my clock. Let me give you an analogy. I'm looking at my clock. It says 9:25 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Okay, so when the clock turns over to 9:26, is it 9:26? Sure it is. When it turns to 9:27, is it 9:27? Sure it is. But no matter how many times I look at the clock, and no matter how many times it changes, it's still right now. What time is it? Right now. It's 9:26. Right now. But it's always going to be right now, no matter what time the clock says. Another factor about reality is you're always right here. So what that means is I'm in my computer office enjoying a conversation with my friend Frater in front of a camera right now, right here. But if I get up and I walk into the next room, maybe I'm in the living room now, but I'm still right here. Wherever I am, no matter where I'm standing, or no matter how many times I change my location, I'm always right here. And no matter what time it is when I look at the clock, it's always right now. So what that means is no matter what you can imagine in reality that exists, because everything exists in probable quantum energy, everything in your imagination is real somewhere. But what's relevant, my point is, what's relevant for you to experience is the here and the now, because that's all you can take control over. That's all you can take action on right now in any given moment. Right here in this moment, it's 9:27 now, but it's still now. It's 9:27 right now. It will always be right now, no matter what time the clock says. And the only thing I can do with my reality is what I can take action on in the here and the now moment. So what I'm getting at is, I don't believe that we are in a computer simulation, but I think that if you look at reality in terms of density, then for the sake of analogy, like, densities are just levels of consciousness. They're not somewhere that you can travel to in a spaceship, or you go in terms of distance. You're always going to be right here and right now, no matter what time it is, where you are in space. But if you look at the analogy of densities, they are levels of consciousness. The more your consciousness expands, the more you understand, the more your belief structures change, then the more about nature. The more you understand what's natural changes, the more of reality expands, because your consciousness has grown to contain more of the all that is. So where am I going with this? It means that, let's say, for example, there are other densities. Well, we're in the third density. There would be a fourth density, a fifth density, a 6, a 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, so on and so forth. And in each of these densities, the physics might work slightly different there. Time might move differently, space by location might be possible, things of that nature, but it's still always going to be right here and right now. So Earth is the third density level of consciousness, where the mass consensus of the human collective, for the most part, oscillates in a very similar frequency to that of the third density, which is why we all have similar rules about physics, time, and space. It doesn't mean that we can't bend or break those rules, and it doesn't mean that they aren't different in another version of reality, but right here and right now, we exist in the 3D. So there are, in a sense, universal laws that we all abide to by mass consensus. They're guidelines, in a sense. But you're always right here and you're always right now. But let's say, for example, you are in the fifth density frequency, not the third, but the fifth. The third density still exists. It's a different type of physics here. But you can actually use types of technology, which we call the immersion program, where, like Neo in the Matrix, you can download to Earth, but you're still going into an organic avatar. You're still going into an organic vessel. And Earth is real as you perceive reality, to whatever that measurement is in your perspective. So what I'm getting at is this a simulation? Is it a hologram? This is as real as any reality you can imagine, and it's the most relevant one, because this is the one that you're experiencing here and now.
I agree. And I mean, as far as computer systems go, I mean, that's another thing. I can say the exact same thing. You know, how do you define computer system? If you're thinking we're inside of a machine with wires run to it, no. But if you're thinking a system that is a program with finite rules, that something very intelligent governs over it and sets parameters, then absolutely. And that's,
I see that,
is the program, because there are natural rules. There, through magic and through ceremony and through other things, you can hack reality.
Right.
You can cut the veil. You can put a little patch in and sew it right back up, and now the program's different. You hacked it a little bit.
Right.
You're only able to hack it. You can't just fool the laws of nature. The laws of nature are finite rules that have been put in to last as long as the program does. So in that sense, yes, it is partially a program, but it's not wires, and we're not batteries like, you know, the Matrix and plugged in. But it, you know, as Dan said earlier, they give us these ideas as openers of you know, expanded consciousness, but also sometimes as prisons, because whenever people see the Matrix for the first time, it opened a lot of minds, and they're like, holy shit. But then it also imprisoned a lot of minds, because now people are like, oh my God, I'm just a battery.
I'm trapped.
And now I'm trapped, and it caused that feeling. So it kind of did both. But yes, folks, we are batteries. We are in a vampiric world. I've talked about this. Every being that exists in a physical avatar, physical body, is a vampire. What do you need to survive? You drink and eat sustenance and nourishment. If you're a meat eater, you're eating another animal. You're eating its flesh to survive. If you're a plant eater, Guess what? They've done studies. Plants actually have, I mean, obviously they're alive, but I'm saying like they actually feel pain.
Yes.
They did an experiment where they could actually pick up the heartbeat, so to speak, of the plant. And as they used chloroform on the plant, they could actually watch the vibrations of the plant start to slow. And just like a human, right before death, as you're like clanging, your heart rate will go crazy before it just goes flatline.
Yeah.
They were watching plants EKGs pretty much.
Yeah. The biorhythm.
Right before it just, it's biorhythm, right before it went to a solid straight line. So that proves that plants are feeling what you're doing to them. They are alive. They do die. So even when someone says, well, I don't eat meat, so I'm not a vampire. Yes, you are. You're eating another living organism to stay alive. So we are all vampires. Everything depends on you taking energy from something else. We are energy vampires. So to some degree or another, you have astral vampires who can learn to actually magically pull energy from someone and drain them to strengthen themselves. But even without that, every one of us survives off of pulling energy from something. So we are all batteries being drained or draining other batteries. That's how the system goes. That's interesting. The archons. Yeah, and we're governed by the archons. So if you want to say about natural roles.
Yeah, what's your perspective on archons?
Yeah, I mean, the Gnostic view is that the archons, the 7 planetary original bodies, back then they only believed in 7. They didn't believe in Neptune. They didn't believe in Pluto. They didn't believe in Uranus. They didn't believe in those planets. They only knew about, Mercury, Venus, Earth. They didn't consider a planet because we were on it. They kind of looked separately from that. So it was Mercury, Venus, the Sun, the Moon, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Were the 7 planets, but they also believe that those energies imbued into everything. So these 7 stars, these 7 planetary bodies also carry 7 vibrations to them, multitude of vibrations, but 7 oceans of vibrations, and they bleed into our natural physical manifestation and dictate a lot of different things. Sympathetic magic is using planetary energy where you can make a talisman of Venus, for example, and do it on the right day. Venus is Friday. So you would on Friday, and then in the hour of Venus, each planet has its own hour as well. On the day of Venus, you could do specific geared rituals to pull down the energy from the astral into physical into a talisman made for specific purposes. Venus has certain attributes to it: love, compassion, lust. Can also be for war. Venus is a war planet, just like Mars. Mars is Tuesday. Tuesday is the day of Mars, and you have a very frictive energy, a very friction, a very warlike, angry, fierce energy. So you could make a talisman that makes you more amped up for battle, or you could use that energy to throw at your enemy and cause them to be agitated themselves or to destroy them. There's ways of using these planetary energies, but those are the archons. They are 7 governing bodies made by the original demiurgos, the demiurge, to control this material manifestation, this matrix. So that has been talked about, in different religions and theories and beliefs, since the dawning of time. I totally should have used that concept in my vampire lecture. Well, there you go. I'm not sure which part you're talking about, but I mean, that is very much, it's not even like a theory. That is just, you know what I mean? Like, I just got done eating a fucking huge chunk of meat right before I came down. It was delicious. And you know what I mean? I needed that for sustenance. I needed that to survive. That was another creature being extinguished so that I could continue to thrive. You know what I mean? And it's fucked up in a way, but
you archon.
You know what I mean? We are fucking monsters. So is Gnosticism the basis for the whole archon concept? I mean, there's different, cultures that believed in archons, but yes, Gnosticism was very much part of that. Gnosticism is the precursor to Christianity. It was Gnostic Christianity. Gnosticism is actually the culture that created Jesus, not the original Christians. Christianity destroyed Gnosticism. Christianity, as they gained power, wanted to root out all the original origins of their own religion. Therefore, they burnt down the temple or the Library of Alexandria. Therefore, they burnt down all these other places with books and manuscripts. They killed and destroyed so many people that believed in that thought. Look at the Cathars. They massacred the Cathars. The Cathars is one of the biggest genocides in history, but you don't even know about it. Most people have no idea who the Cathars were. They never even heard of that. The Cathars were a Gnostic culture, an entire city of people who banded together under one thought and belief of religion, that believed that physicality was sin, that being here in the flesh was a prison, that we were spirits trapped here in the flesh, and our job was to get out of it.
Okay.
They didn't believe in having children. They didn't believe in having sex, because if you were to have a child, you were imprisoning further.
You would create an attachment.
You were creating attachment to flesh, and that was a sin. They didn't believe in doing a lot of things. They didn't eat animal. They didn't like. There were so many roles that they had. They were very ascetic, and the Christians at some point, the Catholics marched in and killed every one of them. They set up a giant bonfire and told them all that they didn't convert over to their belief, that they were going to burn them all alive. And these crazy son of a bitches literally held hands and sang and danced into the fire. It's a famous thing that 1 million some people held hands and danced into a giant inferno and burned alive together with joy, because they refused to be told that they couldn't believe what they wanted to believe. So yes, I believe that Gnosticism is a huge belief in the archons, but you will find it in other cultures as well.
I'll share a brief description, an alternative view on what the archons were, the way that I understood them. When I first learned about archons was just from one perspective of a community. So I obviously work in the extraterrestrial field, and I'm going to start with a disclaimer that I don't subscribe to this belief structure, but the way that I understood archons when I was first introduced to them through the ET community was that, like a New Age ascension community rather, that there is a recycling system, that when we die, because of the mechanics and the physics, the nature of 3D reality, because it's so dense, you don't happen to remember your past or your alternate lives when you incarnate as a human, because the reality here is so dense that your consciousness is more so, in a sense, for lack of a better analogy, separated from source here. Whereas if you lived in like a 4D, 5D, 6D reality, and that was your baseline frequency where you existed, they oftentimes happen to remember more of their lives, more of their past lives. They can see probable future lives that they're going to have while they're still alive in a body like ours. But here in the 3D, because it's more dense, that's partly why you don't remember your past lives or your incarnation cycles. And so the idea here, from this analogy's sake, is that there is a system of archons that take advantage of the fact that the human fractal that incarnates on Earth doesn't remember its past lives. So there was a theory that there was, in a sense, like a net, like an interception net. Some call it like the Van Allen bands. The dome, the firmament around planet Earth almost works as like a net that your consciousness can't escape from. So when you die, your consciousness would go to these recycling centers where it's intercepted by these archons. And what they would do is they would pose as angels. They would pose as your spirit guides. They would pose as like a loving entity that you would trust. They would basically intercept your consciousness while it's leaving Earth, and they would put you in like a life between life reality. And in this life between life reality, they would pose as like a mentor, as a spirit guide, and they would give you like a life review on everything that you did in your incarnation as Daniel James. And they would talk about all the things that you did right, designed by your life path, what your soul contracts were. And then they would emphasize everything that you did wrong, everything that you fucked up, everything that you didn't experience that you wanted to experience before you incarnated. And then what they would do is they would show you all of these areas of missed opportunity that they would say, hey, you know, when you were a little kid, you were supposed to do that. Or when you grow up and you had this job, you were supposed to do that, but you didn't. So what you can do is we suggest you reincarnate again and have another life on Earth. You can repeat your same identity or you can be a new human and follow the same theme of what your contracts are. And then if you just do this one more life, you'll get it right and everything will be great. And then you'll die and then you'll be free and you can move on. Well, the trap that they talked about, that these archons were basically like energy vampires, and they were harvesting luge and harnessing the energy from all of our suffering that we go through as humans in a very difficult school and a difficult training ground that is Earth. There's a lot of suffering that happens here, and it was said that they feed on it. And so what they would do is they would literally just you would die, then your consciousness would go to these recycling centers that look like heaven, but they're actually archons that are posing as angels that trick you into reincarnating over and over and over so that you never evolve and you never move on to the next phase of your journey. You never go to where you belong. You never go home. You never evolve into a more ascended version of yourself. You just keep recycling on Earth over and over and over again, because they were able to abuse the fact that you don't remember your past lives. So that's a big problem, right? That's why I actually taught myself to evolve outside of karma. I let go of the concept of being a victim to karma. And I also let go of the concept that incarnations, I let go of the concept of reincarnation. And now I subscribe to rather the concept of parallel incarnations, that they're all happening at once, simultaneously to each other, as opposed to being behind us. Because of the fact that we don't necessarily remember our past lives when we're here as humans, that can serve as a great disadvantage to us. And if there are entities out there that are intercepting our consciousness when we die and basically influencing us to reincarnate over and over and over again, to be trapped here, then the only way outside of that matrix, that recycling idea, the only way to beat those archons is to expand your consciousness to be bigger than that framework, so that you evolve outside of the belief structure of needing to incarnate at all if you don't choose to, whether you remember your past lives or not.
Well, I think a big part of that, and you mentioned it, I mean, with the 7 archons being, wardens, so to speak, of the prison, and I've talked about this in the past as well, but to different crowds, and I don't know if our listeners have heard it. In the Bible, when Jesus awoke from the tomb and came out, the first one to see him was Mary Magdalene. And it said that he cast 7 demons out of Mary Magdalene, and she became like him. What does this mean? The 7 demons that she cast out of him was the 7 planetary archons' influences. What this is saying is that he broke the construct of her being imprisoned in the regular world that we're in now, and she has now reached super consciousness so that she wouldn't be thrown back into the reincarnation wheel, and was able to reach beyond that, wouldn't have to come back unless she chose to. Now, what I was going to say, and it kind of goes along with what Laura's bringing up as far as numeric. I don't know if it's why she's pulling the number right now, but that's why we have the rule of 3, 7, and 12. In Kabbalistic theory, there's 3, 7, and 12. Why these are important is you have 3 being Aleph, Mem, and Shin, the 3 Hebrew letters, because 3, 7, and 12 make 22. There's 22 Hebrew letters. At the beginning, God said, "Let there be light," or the Elohim said, "Let there be light." He said. He had to speak for creation to come into existence, because speech is vibration in numerics, and it creates the matrix. So 3 is Aleph, Mem, and Shin, air, water, and primordial fire. And that's also the 3 dimensions of our reality. If you put a line, that's 1. You put 2, and then you have the space in between. That makes it a 3D object, and that gives us 3D reality.
That makes sense to me.
The 7 stands for the double consonant letters, or the double letters in Hebrew, and that stands for the 7 days of our week, the 7 chakras of our body, the 7 planets that we were governed by. So now you're starting to see the structure. We're governed by 3D reality. We're governed by 7 days a week and 7 planets. And then what was the last number? 12. 12 being the 12 zodiacal signs of the zodiacal wheel. So now you start to see an actual matrix being built, different than a computer system. But the Kabbalists believe that we are governed by the 22 Hebrew letters. The 20 in all Hebrew letters, folks, follow a system called gematria. Gematria means that every single letter of Hebrew is equivalent to a numeric value. Those numeric values will blow your mind if you start to look into it, because if you add up the numeric value of a word, let's say ball, whatever number that comes out to, you look at other words that equate to that same numeric value, you'll see ball, sphere, circle. All of a sudden you're like, holy shit, all these different words add up to the same number and they're all the same thing. What the, and then you start to realize, how is it possible that ball, sphere, circle, different letters, different things all add up to the same numeric resonance as one another?
Right.
Because then you start to realize that speech, numbers, letters were all created in some type of master system. So it breaks down to the 22 Hebrew letters. Also, if you look at the Sephirotic tree of life, which is a diagram of the 10 emanation spheres of God called the Sephirot, and the 22 paths in between them that connect the tree of life, they call it the 32 paths of wisdom. Then you have 22 Hebrew letters, and then the numbers 1 through 10. Or really the number 1 through 9. Keter, the top, is 1, and it moves down through 9 spheres until you get to the 10th, which is Melkuth, earth. But 10 isn't a number because 1 and 0 make 1 again. There are only 9 numbers, folks. You can make a combination of numbers, but in existence, there are only 9 numbers that exist. And there's 22 letters. And it gets very interesting when you look at that and you start to see that matrix being built, that we're governed by 7 planets, 7 days, 12 zodiacal signs, and a 3D reality, 22 positions.
That is fascinating. It resonates with me very much. I'm not as researched on that concept as you are, but it does make a lot of sense to me.
See, Archon, Trickster, and stop feeding them. Yeah, stop feeding them, man. But the thing is, you have to feed them to stop feeding them. You have to continue to play the game and feed them until you can reach a consciousness level that you don't need to. Because as Dan said, the denser you are, the less perspective you have.
Right.
Think of a rock. A rock doesn't see much. A rock just sits there. It sees what's in front of it, it's around it, if it could see, right?
It has a low level of awareness.
Of awareness and consciousness. But if you look at the air, it's kind of something separate. The air's blowing, the wind's blowing. It sees an expanse because it's higher in vibration. Right. Same thing with beings. You are in a 3D matrix as a human body, and you have awareness and keep getting smarter and more conscious. But as you raise those levels of consciousness, why do you seem to be smarter and more intelligent and more in tune? You can tell someone who's does the work and someone who's starting to be very enlightened compared to someone who's not. It's not just that, oh, he's very learned and he's smart. No, you can feel the vibration. I'm like, oh shit, this dude or this woman or whoever they are, they're really climbing, because you do truly start to raise in consciousness and you're seeing a vaster area of all worlds. And as you get higher and higher, you reach beyond the realm of this 3D matrix. That's why the chakras are important. They do align to the archons. The 7 planets do align to the 7 days of the week. That's why each day of the week's named after a planet. Monday, moon. Friday, Freya's day. That's a goddess. It's Friday's Venus. Freya and Venus, similar. So when you look at that, they're all tied. The chakras and the colors match with the planets, match with the days of the week. Inside of our internal vessels, we have many archons that have to be mastered so that you can also defeat the higher archons. If you have blockages in your archons and your chakras, your system doesn't rise. You're blocked. You get illness. If you have a blockage in your heart chakra or your throat chakra, you're going to have issues pertaining to the heart, to the heart system, to your throat system, thyroid, different things that you're going to experience as an inefficiency to having a blockage there. So as you clear them, energy moves through them. You secrete the milk and honey, you raise the kundalini, you awaken the third eye pineal gland and the 1,000-petal lotus, and you ascend to a consciousness that most people will never experience in their life. And when you open that kundalini truly, and you open up the third eye chakra, that you really start making that pineal endocrine system flow properly, you start to ascend to a level you don't have to come back here again. So
Right.
archons do definitely have a play in what's going on here. There's more to it than that, but for people asking, that would be a way I would look at it and study, is that it is embedded in everything we know. That's why there's 7 chords. That's why there's 7 colors, 7 days of the week, 7 planets. You'll see the 7. That's why 7 is such a sacred number. It's also sacred because it makes up the triplicity, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, antithesis, thesis, and so forth. There's the 3, and then there's the 4 elements: fire, air, water, earth. So you have the triplicity, and the 4-fold elements together make the sacred number of 7, which is
Right.
everything.
Looks like we might have the last question of the night here.
Perfect.
Mostly plant-based asks, what about the ability to see what's in another place without physically going there or seeing videos, etc.? Remote viewing.
Do you want to start that out, Dan?
Yeah, absolutely. So I can remote view. I'm taught and trained in remote viewing. I can also do some low-level astral projection. I can also do channeling. What we're talking about, what I call, is spirit technology. These are very real abilities that you can learn. There are astral realms that are all around us, beneath us, above us, below us, in every corner and every side. And you can actually project your consciousness to astral realms, both lower and upper, where it's literally like Frater is well researched in this. It's a whole other version of reality that's laid right on top of our 3D reality all around us. So when it comes to the concept of, say, remote viewing or astral projection, these are a very real phenomenon. Like I said, this is something that you can learn how to do. It isn't just a gift that some people are adept in. It can be taught. And when you're doing these things, what I like to tell people is, remember that you're a creator of your own reality. So in a sense, you can look at it like, yeah, my consciousness is going, I'm traveling somewhere, and I'm seeing outside of my body. But you're also still creating that version of reality that you see as you travel. So that can help sort of diminish any sort of doubt you have when learning how to remote view or astral project, that it's not a matter of your imagination, because your imagination is real. Everything that you see, you're creating, and that exists in creation. So with astral projection, remote viewing, like I said, it's a very real phenomenon. I know how to do it. I just used remote viewing a week and a half ago to find something that was lost in my house that I couldn't locate. So I went into a light meditation. I closed my eyes. I did a breathing technique that I use, and I send sort of like a visual astral version of myself outside of my body, and I let it guide me to where the missing item was, which was somewhere that I never would have looked on my own. It was actually in a cabinet that I hadn't gone in months for any reason, and I didn't even put it there. Somebody else did, but I used remote viewing to find it. So that's what I'll say to start it off. But Frater, you can go ahead and jump in on this.
Absolutely. And I mean, I'm glad you brought up that point, because we think of remote viewing as like, I'm looking at a place in, Vietnam right now, because it was used during Operation Ashtray, I think it was called, and different other operations in the military where people would remote view missile silos and
which
things
we
in
still
other
have
countries, which we still have. Absolutely. CIA uses that pretty heavily. And, that is one aspect of remote viewing. But as Dan just, alluded to, you can do it as the atmosphere of a place. So
Yes.
it's similar, but it doesn't have to be far away and for other reasons. I've used it in investigation where I go into a mediumistic state during Estes method, which I'm not going to get into that night. If you know what Estes method is, that's great. If not, look it up. And I'll use that and actually go into what I call envision, and I will become the place that I'm investigating.
Right.
And I become the wall. So not just viewing, but I actually embed myself with the frequency of the location that I'm at by allowing myself to dissolve and become that place.
That's what I'm saying.
And I can see as the rooms, and then I can help to locate where the spirits are. So all of a sudden I'm pulled to a specific room of the house that might be 6 rooms away. And in that room, I'm seeing the spirits move around. And as I come back to my body and tell my team, all right, we need to go up to the 2nd bedroom on the left. That's where they're at. And we go up there and we have phenomenal experiences. Does it always happen that way? No, it's very hard to get to that state of mind in one of those type of settings, but have done it numerous times with witnesses. So, I mean, that's a different way of looking at remote viewing. But the biggest part is we're all capable of doing this because we're all, once again, spirit.
Right.
We got to stop identifying that we're bodies. Yes, we
Yes.
have this. This is flesh. We maneuver with this. But do you identify yourself with your car? No, that's just your car, right? Oh, I need to go somewhere. I'm going to jump in the car and drive there. Well, it's an extension of you, right? It's yours. You own it. You use it. You get from A to B with it, but you are not your car. Well, think about that. Your body is your vehicle. You're in it more than your car, but it is your spiritual car, and you drive it from A to B to get to places. It has a bunch of functions that you can use and bells and whistles. But at the end of the day, when you go to sleep and you're in the dream world, are you your body? No, you don't even know you're in your body when you're sleeping.
Right.
You're in the astral realm, moving around, having wild dreams, and all these things happen. And then you wake up and you're back in the car again.
Right.
But why is that? Because when you're sleeping, most of your motor functions shut down. You go through the hypnagogic state of sleep into the deeper REM sleep, and we go into who we really are. We're spirit.
That's right.
So the reason I bring this up is through advanced techniques of meditation, you dissolve the body as well. And you can not only go to different areas, like Daniel said, in remote view and see things across the world, or even see your own home and view things from an aerial view. You can reach states of samadhi where everything dissolves, the world vanishes, and you are in an absolute silence of peace, because everything is capable once you remove the restrictions that you place on yourself,
Right.
because you identify with something that you're not. So I think that's a great way of looking at things. I think that's a great way of stopping, this evening kind of there, unless Daniel, you'd like to add
Nope.
more. But I mean, I want to thank all of you guys for obviously your comments. We want to thank Bex, who called in earlier and gave us a couple of incidences that she has experienced as far as phenomena. And, make sure you click the like, share, follow, and subscribe buttons. We have one more episode next Thursday, and that'll be the season finale for season 4. So, we're wrapping up another season. It's been an awesome set of episodes. Make sure you go back and check them all out. And make sure you check out the Celestial Oddities PairOfNormal Guys Facebook group page and the Celestial Oddities Radio Facebook page, both on Facebook. Give it a like, give it a follow. And we really appreciate all of your guys' support, as always.
Right on, guys. Thank you very much for being here. We will be back on Thursday, the 29th. This will be a topic episode and then the closing of this season. So thank you very much for being here. Thanks for engaging in the chat, sharing your stories, letting us express ourselves. And that's it.
All right, guys. Well, we will catch you next Thursday here on Celestial Oddities Radio. Signing